Welcome back to the Republic Brothers Podcast. I'm Mike, and he's Matt, and this is episode 18. Today is December 3rd, 2025. Today we're hitting a packed lineup. The Trump administration has halted all immigration applications for people from 19 countries after the National Guard shooting. We have the fight over SNAP. Susan and Mike Dell are pledging $6.25 billion to seed Trump accounts. And the big one, the Tim Walz scandal. We're talking about massive fraud across multiple social service programs, dozens of people charged, and hundreds of millions of dollars stolen. We have a lot to get into. Let's get started. Welcome back, Matt. We are here again, episode 18. I want to open the show with a comment we got on a clip we posted from the last episode about the National Guard shooting. So we mentioned on the podcast that mental illness was no excuse for violence, and someone always runs to the comments to say, it's not the person, it's the guns. We have more guns in this country than people. There's no restrictions on guns, etc., etc. So let's address these real quickly before we get started with the rest of the show. So firstly, it's not the person, it's the guns. We have too many guns. It's not the guns. It takes a human being to pull the trigger. If we took away anything that has the potential to kill someone, we wouldn't have cars or trains or planes or knives, no wrenches to fix our cars, no screwdrivers. The list goes on and on and on. The common denominator in every single homicide is human beings. The cold hard truth is that people, not guns, make bad decisions. And the second one, there's no restrictions on guns. That is an outright lie. Some of the strictest gun laws come from Democratic-run cities, yet they still have the highest homicide rates. Federal law prohibits gun ownership for convicted felons, domestic violence offenders, fugitives, illegal drug users, people involuntarily committed for mental health, illegal immigrants, anyone with a dishonorable discharge, and people indicted under certain crimes. If there were no restrictions on guns, every one of those categories would be allowed to own a gun, and they simply aren't.
And these people have clearly never gone to a gun store and tried to buy one. It takes days, especially if you haven't passed the background check already. I would like to ask all these people who think guns kill people, if an inanimate object is used for something, is it the object's fault that it happened? Did the spoon make you fat? Did the pencil misspell all those words when you were in school? When you hear of a drunk driver killing someone, was it the car's fault? Should we ban cars? I own a gun, but it must be a bit defective because it hasn't shot anyone. I should get a refund. I looked it up. About 44,000 people died in 2024 via guns, and some of those were justified, as in they were self-defense. According to the National Safety Council, about the same number of deaths happened in preventable traffic crashes, and the data would suggest that about 12,000 of those, roughly 30%, were DUIs. According to the CDC, over 100 million Americans have obesity, which is defined as a body mass index over 30. Should we ban spoons and forks for making people obese? But that's not the ultimate point of the Second Amendment. The Constitution states that we have firearms to protect ourselves from enemies, foreign and domestic. It is an incentive for our own government not to oppress its own people, and it guarantees foreign governments won't try to invade the U.S. You need one troop for every 50 people you're trying to occupy. That doesn't account for a population like the U.S. where the citizens are armed to the gills. Why do you think Ukraine was giving out guns to citizens when Russia started the invasion?
Exactly. We could go on and on and on about this topic for days. And that's not even all of the comments that we see. You see these people who go out and debate about gun laws get into the same things. And we say the same things over and over and over, and people still don't get it. But I wanted to bring it up real quick. Maybe somebody out there listening will hear it, and it'll click eventually.
Yeah, and there's something like 450 million guns in this country. If guns were just out here killing people, there'd be a lot more than 44,000 deaths. And you can't claim that they go off on their own sometimes. That happens maybe once every couple years.
Yeah, there's 4 alone just in my house, and none of them have ever pulled the trigger themselves. So maybe I should be asking for a refund like you. Like I said, I wanted to bring that up real quick just so we could touch on it pretty quick. We have a lot of stuff to get to today. Next on our list is the Trump administration has halted all immigration applications filed by people from 19 countries. Its latest move to restrict legal immigration pathways following the shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. last week. The internal U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services guidance obtained by CBS News shows the agency directed employees on Monday to stop final adjudication on all cases involving individuals from 19 nations that are facing restrictions under a proclamation President Trump issued in June. That pause includes a completion of citizenship ceremonies for legal U.S. permanent residents from the list of 19 countries who are on the cusp of becoming naturalized American citizens. It's suggested the suspension is an interim step while the administration develops further guidance on the vetting of the affected immigrants. The new guidance indicates that the immigration crackdown directed by Trump following last week's shooting of the National Guard members is much broader in scope than previously reported. The man accused of shooting the 2 Guard members is an Afghan evacuee who entered the U.S. in September of 21 and was granted asylum in April of 25. In a statement to CBS News on Tuesday, the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees the USCIS, did not dispute the planned suspension of applications. The agency said, quote, "The Trump administration is making every effort to ensure individuals becoming citizens are the best of the best. We will take no chances when the future of our nation is at stake. The Trump administration is reviewing all immigration benefits granted by the Biden administration to aliens from countries of concern." Then, earlier on Tuesday, CBS News reported that Trump administration officials are considering expanding the travel ban to encompass more countries in response to last week's shooting. The total list of nations whose nationals could face travel and immigration restrictions on national security grounds could grow to around 30. So, Matt, I'll get your opinion on this, and then I'll throw my 2 cents in.
Yeah, my first thought was which countries, and I looked at the list. Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, Cuba, Turkmenistan, Venezuela. I'm fine with it. You look at all of the countries on the list, and for the most part, they are desperately poor or war-ravaged countries led by dictators or terrorist regimes. These are the people that should be vetted the most. People coming from France or England or Japan understand more what they are signing up for. They have free access to the internet and they understand more about our culture before they come. You have to ensure the people coming into your country want to join your way of life. Otherwise, they will try to tear down the system. Ilhan Omar is the perfect example. She came here from a desperately poor nation in Somalia, used the way of government in capitalism to make money and get into the government and amass a net worth of $30 million. But instead of appreciating the system that let her amass that large quantity of wealth and provided her with a very safe life, she's trying to tear it down. This is how socialist countries end up with every ordinary citizen in poverty, while the government's top officials become extraordinarily wealthy. Promise the world, accumulate the power, then keep the money for yourself, and let everyone else be poor.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Ilhan Omar. She left Somalia to come here, got into politics and got into government, and now she's trying to change us into the poor country that she left. You see that a lot with immigrants. They leave these countries to get a better life, but then they try to turn us into the country that they left. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and when Trump took office and started deporting people, how many people were out running around with Mexican flags? They said that it was a human rights violation to deport these people, and yet they run around with the flag like Mexico's a great place.
Yeah, if it's so great, why are you so mad that we're sending you back? I share the same sentiment as you with this whole thing. I think there's a lot of people that come here and they fall through the cracks. They're not vetted properly. It's all a big gong show, and then they go and do something stupid, and we have to go back and look at everybody again. There needs to be a much more thorough process when we're looking at these people to determine if we should A, let them come here, and then B, let them stay.
And it's not just the US that's dealing with this. England is the perfect example. England had a great immigration system for 70 years. They brought in somewhere between 30 and 50,000 immigrants. They were well vetted. They were prepared to join the way of life of the British. But over the last 10 or 12 years, the number has skyrocketed to the millions. How can you vet that many people? And it's interesting, when you look at the charts for number of illegal immigrants who came into the country, there's a 4-year stretch where it absolutely skyrockets. And then it suddenly falls off a cliff again. You could probably figure out when that was.
I'm going to guess 2021 to 2024.
Spot on.
Yeah, I'm good with it. I think they should look at everybody, make sure everybody deserves to be here. This is the greatest country in the world. You can try to argue that all you want, but it just is. So if you want to come here and live in our country, you have to follow our rules and you have to assimilate with our way of life. That doesn't mean that you can't have your own culture and do certain things your own way, but don't run around the streets trying to tell everybody else how they have to act and what they have to hear.
If that way of life was so good, why did you leave where you were?
Exactly. Well, while we're on the topic of Trump, President Trump's administration warned on Tuesday that it will withhold money for SNAP in most Democratic-controlled states starting next week unless those states provide information about the people receiving the assistance. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said at a cabinet meeting Tuesday that the action is looming because those states are refusing to provide data the department requested, such as the names and immigration status of recipients. She said cooperation is needed to root out fraud in the program. A USDA spokesperson later explained that the agency is targeting the administrative funds, not the benefits that people receive. 22 states and the District of Columbia previously sued over the request for information, which was initially made in February. And of course, a San Francisco-based federal judge has barred the administration, at least for now, from collecting the information from those states. The federal government last week sent the states a letter urging compliance and agreed to give the states until December 8th to respond. Federal law allows the USDA to withhold some of the money states receive for administering SNAP if there's a pattern of noncompliance with certain federal regulations. Roughly 42 million lower-income Americans, or 1 in 8, rely on SNAP to help buy groceries. The average monthly benefit is about $190 per person. Take into account that most households have 3 or more people in them. Brooke Rollins has cited information provided by states that have complied, saying that it shows 186,000 deceased people are receiving SNAP benefits and that 500,000 are getting benefits more than once. Rollins asked all the states for the first time to turn over their data to the federal government to let the USDA partner with them to root out this fraud, to make sure that those who really need food stamps are getting them, and to ensure that the American taxpayer is protected. The USDA said Tuesday evening that 28 states and Guam have complied with the request for information. That list consists primarily of states with Republican governors, with the exception of North Carolina. 22 states have sued to block the request. So this begs the question, why are these 22 states not handing over the information? In my opinion, they know there's a ton of fraud in their system, and in order for them to keep those votes, they have to say they're standing up to Trump and his administration. The headline of this article should have been 22 states virtue signal because Orange Man bad. What do you think about this, Matt?
Yeah, I really agree with you here. It sounds to me like they're complicit in the fraud, and this is their way of kind of buying votes. You let people keep the benefits they get fraudulently, and they'll vote for you because the Republicans are the ones trying to take the benefit away. In my opinion, it should not be legal for states to take federal tax dollars and have no accountability on where the money went. We demand the Ukrainians and the Israelis tell us exactly how they do things and how they spend the money because we contribute. Why can't we do the same with the states? And I also find it quite interesting that it's mostly Democrat-run states that didn't provide the data. The only real good thing that came out of the government shutdown is it revealed just how rampant fraud is in some of the welfare programs we have.
Yeah, spot on. They obviously know there's a ton of fraud. Like I said, they want to keep those votes because if they comply, then everybody's going to be like, oh, why'd you sell me out? And they don't want to lose those votes. So they blame it on Donald Trump and say he's trying to take your money away from you so that in the next election, they'll vote for whoever the Democrat is.
I find it quite funny that we're so concerned over how dollars are used in certain situations. Why is it that we're okay with illegal immigrants taking welfare from these programs, but if it's an American citizen, it's bad? I don't understand this. Why do they want what's best for people who are abusing the system and not the people who are paying for it? This kind of leads into our next topic. FBI Director Kash Patel is now under investigation from top Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee for his use of the FBI's Gulfstream jet for personal things like date nights or visiting friends. I really just wanted to bring this up. Could you imagine the director of the FBI flying on a commercial flight with you?
I mean, I would certainly go get a picture with him.
You would, but others would throw coffee at him.
Yeah.
This to me really is only a big story because it's the Trump administration. It is worth noting that Democrats only requested this information from Patel, and they don't have the subpoena power, so it is only a request. But it's actually law that the FBI director only uses government aircraft so they have access to secure communications at all times. They have to reimburse the government for private flights. I think Patel could silence this story pretty quickly if he turned over the flight logs and then provided the information on what he had reimbursed the government for. I think it's a big nothing burger of a story, but it's potential waste, and Democrats love that if it's on the Republican side. I would hope when Patel does give over these flight logs, if he does, that he also hands over the logs for the previous 4 years when his predecessor was in charge, and let's see how often he was using the jet and how often they were private flights and how often he reimbursed the government for. I have a feeling private flights are pretty common for an FBI director.
I'm sure that's how they get around basically everywhere they go. Like you said, I hope that Kash Patel says, okay, here you go, hands over the flight logs, hand over the flight logs for the last 8 years, and let's see what it looks like. We wanted to touch on that real quick, but let's move on to our next topic. Susan and Michael Dell are giving $6.25 billion. That will give roughly 25 million children $250 each through the Trump accounts, aka Invest America accounts. Trump accounts will be tax-deferred investment accounts that guardians can open for eligible children under the age of 18. For babies born in the U.S. after December 31st, 2024 and before January 1st, 2029, the government will make a one-time contribution of $1,000 to each account, which will be privately held by the beneficiary's guardians. The accounts will track a stock index and allow for additional private contributions up to $5,000 per year. When the children turn 18, they'll have the option of withdrawing money from the account to fund their education or a new business or a bunch of different things. The Dell's donation will expand on the Trump accounts, seeding 25 million additional accounts with $250 each for children who were born before the qualifying date for the $1,000 federal contribution. Children aged 10 and under who were born before 2025 are eligible for the $250 funded by the Dell's donation. I like the donation from the Dells. What I don't like is the original $1,000 from Trump, and this is part of the big, beautiful bill. This goes back to the same question that we always ask. Who is paying for that? I do not think that this money should come from the government, in all honesty. I think it's going to end up being the same thing that we have in all these other government programs. Are the kids actually going to get this money? How many parents do you think are actually going to contribute to this $1,000. And how many people are going to have kids just so they can get that free $1,000 that shouldn't be having kids anyway? They're going to have a kid, get the extra SNAP benefits, and then when the kid turns 18, they're going to say, oh, by the way, here's $1,000, or they're just going to keep it for themselves, is what I think.
Yeah, quick math on that. Starting with $1,000, assuming the parents put nothing into it, and they just got a fairly standard rate of return, it'd be somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 18 years later. Look, that would be helpful. It's not the worst idea. You'd like to see parents taking more of an initiative, and many do, but it is a question of, is this the best use of our resources? We always ask the question, how are you paying for it? And it is American taxpayers that are going to pay for this. Are there better options? I think so, but it's not the worst thing that could have happened.
Yeah, and I don't have any kids that are going to get the $1,000, and my wife and I are not having any more kids to get that $1,000, but we do have 3 children that are going to be eligible for the $250 from the Dells. And since it was a donation from Michael and Susan Dell, that's completely different. They're the ones that are paying for it. It's very nice of them to do that. I will take that $250 and I will accept that account for my children, and I will probably add to it. I already have accounts set up to save up for, whatever they may need in the future, right? So that $250 will be a benefit to them at some point. But it's the $1,000 per kid that are born in the next 3 years that I'm just not super stoked about the whole thing. And how exactly is the whole program going to work? They haven't even announced how you sign up for it. And you can't even sign up for it. I think I saw until like July 1st of next year. It's good and bad. There's good and bad things here.
We've talked about demographics on this podcast a few times. I wonder if this is secretly something Trump is doing to incentivize having kids.
That I was going to ask you that question.
I would hope if that was the case, he would specify it so it made more sense. By the way, more quick math. If you took the $1,000 and invested the maximum amount annually, you'd have a couple $100,000 at the end of it. $200,000, easily enough to start a business, to go to school. So it's a good launching pad, and hopefully it gets parents to invest for their kids' future. Unfortunately, cost of living is pretty high, and most families simply don't have $5,000 extra to spare. And as you said, how will this all be set up, and how do you acquire that money and that account? Big questions that we don't have an answer to. Hopefully we get an answer to. I don't think we've talked much about the Big Beautiful Bill. I don't think that's an appropriate name. I know Trump tried to rename it, but there was a lot of waste in that as well. I get why he did it. It would be worse if he didn't pass the Big Beautiful Bill than if he did. The tax cuts he passed in his first presidency would have expired, and that would have been really bad because then people would have less of their paycheck, and the left would absolutely hammer him on that.
Yeah, and for anybody that has multiple children during this, has 2 or 3 kids in that 3-year span, how many of those people, let's say they have 3 kids, how many of those people are going to have an extra $15,000 laying around to contribute the maximum $5,000 per year into each account? It's just not going to happen. You're going to have a very small subset of people who are able to invest that money into those accounts. And those people probably already have other things set up for their kids, or they have the money to pay for them to go to college or do whatever.
And this is just a free $1,000 for them. If they had the $5,000 to $15,000 in your case with 3 kids, they would almost certainly have the capability to do this on their own.
I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere as well, you were saying if this was about, demographics and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure I did see somewhere that Trump said that this was incentive to get people to have more kids. So I think that is the goal here, is to encourage people to have more kids.
If that were the case, it's a good idea, But given how expensive it is to raise kids, I struggle to see how $1,000 is going to significantly impact the birth rate. I saw a study less than a week ago that said to have a kid in California, it costs about $36,000 a year to raise that kid. 1,000 is a drop in the bucket. If you could stress that at the end there's potentially hundreds of thousands, it might help. But I don't think most people are going to look at it that way. A lot of people are just concerned with getting food on the table and keeping the lights on this week or this month, and they're not looking 18 years in the future.
All right, well, let's get into our last topic here. This is the big one. There is a ton to unpack here. We're probably going to spend quite a bit of time on this, and there's a bunch that we're not even going to get to at this point. Over the past several months, Minnesota has been rocked by large-scale allegations of fraud involving state social services and relief funding programs. Specifically, one of the biggest cases centers on a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future, accused of submitting false claims for meals and services during COVID, which led to fraudulent reimbursements. Prosecutors have charged dozens of people so far in what's been described as one of the largest pandemic relief fraud schemes in the U.S. Additional allegations extend beyond Feeding Our Future. There are also concerns about misuse or lax oversight in housing stabilization services and other state-run social programs. Critics argue that under Tim Walz's leadership, the state agencies responsible for those programs failed to implement proper oversight and internal controls, making fraud easier. Some Minnesota Department of Human Services staff have publicly blamed Walz, alleging the administration's mismanagement allowed widespread misuse of taxpayer funds. As the scandal gained traction, a report from the state's legislative auditor found non-compliance issues in the governor's office, suggesting systemic weaknesses in the checks and balances under his administration.
Look, we know Tampon Tim Walz is a bad leader. We saw that in his run as a VP candidate. This is a guy who said he was friends with school shooters and put tampons in the boys' bathroom as governor. His biggest accomplishments are free school breakfast and lunch and protecting abortion and gender-affirming care. He also gave over 55,000 prisoners the right to vote again. And those are his big accomplishments. I wouldn't call those big wins, but add in the fraud that he ignored and deflected blame on. It doesn't look great for his leadership role. I looked up his employment history, and he's been a teacher, a member of the National Guard who lied about going to combat, and being a politician. No business is created, no business is run. The only good thing is that he was mostly teaching geography during his teaching days and not history or math or leadership.
Yeah, well, it gets better. The U.S. Department of the Treasury announced it's investigating whether taxpayer funds from Minnesota were illegally diverted, with some unverified claims suggesting that the money might have ended up funding the militant group Al-Shabaab. At the same time, state lawmakers have demanded accountability. A panel tasked with oversight has questioned housing and social services officials, noting that some programs were too easy for providers to enroll in without adequate vetting. So far, over 70 people have been charged and accused of stealing hundreds of millions of dollars in federal meal program money. And this wasn't a one-off. It happened across multiple programs, all under Tim Walz's administration. His administration wasn't watching while these people took tons of money. Now, Tim Walz is trying to distance himself by saying that he wants them to investigate. These people use this money to splurge on a lavish lifestyle, fancy cars, real estate as far away as Turkey and Kenya. Reports say Walz was told of the fraud early on and he did nothing about it. Now, do you think Walz ignored the warning signs, or was the system broken before he took over?
Tough to say. Did he ignore the warning signs, or did he just not care about the warning that he was getting? As far as the system being broken or Walz ignoring it, probably some of both. A person good at their job wouldn't ignore the signs that fraud was running rampant through all your programs. But more than one thing can be true at a time. So my money would be on the welfare programs having been broken for a while, but Walz knew about it and doing nothing.
I would agree with that, 100%. Now, when Walz says that he welcomes the investigation, do you buy that? Or is it just political damage control at this point? Like he's trying to step back and avoid taking any blame?
Yeah, it's damage control. You can't come out and say there was no fraud, because if there is an investigation and it reveals fraud, you have egg on your face. But you also know if you come out and say there is nothing to see here, they'll look even harder and will likely find something. This is kind of his way of trying to split the gap politically. He's simply trying to say nothing so that later on you don't bring up his own words against him.
Do these scandals make you question how many other programs around the country are being abused? Like, we know there's fraud in SNAP, but what about everything else?
Well, yeah, the only good thing of that government shutdown, as I said earlier, was it exposing some of the fraud in the welfare programs. We know there is fraud in almost every government program, but it's to different extents. What we don't know is how bad the fraud is. I've long thought that this was an issue that the government just didn't really look into that much because it wasn't an enormous amount of money, or it was a very small percentage of the total spend by the government. But it's not looking like that's the case. It's looking more and more like there is widespread fraud and we aren't getting a handle on it.
Yeah, I don't know what Tim Walz's plans are for the future in terms of politics and if he's going to try to make a run at it again nationally. But I think this is really going to come back to hurt him.
I think even before this scandal hit, I think he was done. I find it really funny that Democrats knew that young men in particular were shifting away from the Democrat Party, so they went to get a masculine role model to bring men back to their side, and they picked Tim Walz, the guy who put tampons in the boys' bathroom in schools.
Yeah, so if he does try to run again on a national level, or even at any level, really, how hard do you think the right and his political opponents are going to hit him with this?
The right will come pretty hard at him for this if he does run again and it turns out that a lot of this fraud is primarily his fault. Even if he knew and did nothing, he would take a hit nationally, in particular from the right, because they'll be the ones that cover it. I don't think the left-leaning media will cover it, though. Donald Trump does enough to give them the stories to cover. There is enough out there for them to say it wasn't the biggest story and that's why we didn't cover it, because there were more pressing issues in regards to the president of the country. It wouldn't surprise me if this was never a talking point on, say, CNN.
So one of the biggest things that I'm worried about is whether or not we're going to get the full truth here. Do you think the Treasury Department is going to get the full truth, or is politics going to influence the outcome of this?
Yeah, we've seen how hard the left will fight things if Trump is on the other side. I would expect nothing different here. I would suspect we'll get some answers, but it's hard for me to sit here and say that we're going to get the entire truth. If they give in and provide all of the data, their own far left side will say they aren't fighting Trump hard enough, and that might dissuade them from going to the polls in 2026 or 2028.
Now, the other thing I was thinking about here, if the investigators find that money left the country, does this become a national security issue? If any of this money went to groups that are hostile against America, it could be used for things like training, weapons, recruitment, and operations that might pose a threat to us. What about that? I mentioned Al-Shabaab earlier. How does a group like that getting some of this money affect the original question with national security?
It's interesting. We might never know the full extent of it, but Al-Shabaab is mainly based in West Africa, primarily southern Somalia. Any connections with Ilhan Omar? Who knows? But they are linked to Al-Qaeda. So that should tell you something. In my opinion, odds are no. Odds are the money went into smaller groups that don't have international interests, at least for the time being. We mentioned Al-Shabaab. They don't have the resources to be thinking of large-scale attacks on U.S. soil. Most groups don't have the capability to strike very far from home. But there is the concern that millions of people poured across our border every year under Joe Biden. There is always a chance some of those people had links back to a terrorist organization who, given the opportunity for some notoriety, might use this to gain attention. It is at a minimum a massive waste of money. I'd say it won't be a national security threat, but never say never.
This whole scandal raises a bigger question. Is the government just too big to manage programs like this? When you have federal money going through state agencies, then through nonprofits, and then through providers, there's so many layers that nobody's really watching. Would this kind of fraud even be possible if programs were handled on a smaller, more local level with real accountability? In other words, is the system so centralized and bloated that it basically guarantees waste and corruption?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but yes, in my opinion, the government is too big. On the waste part, I ask you a question, Mike. Name one government program that finished on time and under budget.
I got nothing.
I don't either. It all kind of comes back to doing things at a smaller scale. When you do it at a smaller scale, the numbers are smaller and oversight is easier. The federal government spends something like $6.8 trillion a year. How on earth do you keep track of that amount of money? And you can make the argument that it's broken down into segments and categories. For example, national defense, where you do have a smaller group and smaller dollar amounts to manage and oversee. But even in the national defense case, you're still talking over $800 billion. And there are multiple programs that exceed that. Now, I really do paint a bit of a doomsday picture here, but it's important to point out that we say there is waste and corruption in the U.S. government, and there is, but it is nowhere near as bad here in the U.S. as it is in other nations. In the last few episodes, we've talked about corruption in countries like Ukraine or China. 1/3 of Russia's defense budget is stolen or embezzled. Many communist and socialist countries see fraud and corruption on scales that Americans just could not comprehend. So it's bad for us, but on a global scale, it's not that bad. But it is our money that's being wasted, so we should care, and we should try and root out all fraud.
Well, using the Democrats' logic on gun control, the government is bad and steals money from us, so we should just get rid of it, right?
Hey, that'd bring back the wild, wild west. For all them crazy gun owners in Texas, that wouldn't be too bad, would it?
Nope. Well, we have certainly been talking about Tim Walz and this whole scandal for a while. I'm sure there'll be a lot more information that comes out, but we wanted to bring it up. Let's move on to the last segment, as always, our blind ranking segment. So, Matt, tell us what the category is and give me your list, and then I'll give you mine.
Yeah, we've had some fun with the states as a blind ranking topic. So today we're going to go specific cities. I'll give you a city, and you blind rank it 1 to 5 based on which one you most want to live in. The first city up is Miami, Florida.
Miami, Florida. Okay, so obviously it's in Florida, so, you know, a little bit more of a Republican state, but Miami, the city, a little different. That's a tough one.
That is a Republican city, too, even though it's mostly Hispanic.
Oh, is it really?
Miami-Dade went Republican in the last election, I believe.
Okay.
And in 2020, it was pretty strongly Republican.
Okay, so that changes things a little bit. It's still just so hot in Florida. I'm taking into account everything here.
You've also got hurricanes.
That's true. A lot
And
of
I don't mean the
hurricanes.
football team.
Yeah. I'm going to put Miami at 3.
You're going 3. Okay. Next up is Boise, Idaho.
Boise, Idaho. Well, I get my cold weather in Boise, that's for sure. You know what? I'm gonna gamble a little bit here, and I am gonna put Boise at 1.
Going number 1.
Yep.
Oh,
I'm gonna go 1.
I thought Miami would be a number 1 contender, but then you went 3.
Well, I get the cold weather in Boise. It is a right-leaning state and city, and there's no hurricanes. So
Next up on the list is San Diego, California.
I have had the pleasure or displeasure of visiting San Diego, California before. I'm going to put San Diego at 5.
You're going number 5.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm going number 5. That's another gamble. So I got 2 and 4 left.
If it's all about the cold weather, you'll be disappointed you went number 1 on Boise. Next up, Anchorage, Alaska. You got 2 and 4 open.
I'm going to put Anchorage at 2.
Anchorage at 2. And now we find out if you're happy with number 4 and 5. Your number 4, Washington, D.C.
Nailed it. I like it.
You're going D.C. over San Diego?
I mean, yeah, I think even in D.C., I can travel to other places. There's a lot of other places that are close to D.C. where I can get out of there. But in San Diego,
Mexico.
I think I'm happy with that. Maybe I would flip Anchorage and Boise, but that's really a toss-up. I think the rest of it's pretty solid.
I thought you would go Miami higher.
No, I can't do the hot weather like that. And then in the real big city, I'm not a fan of that. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to live out in the boondocks, but I also don't want to live right in the middle of a giant city. All right, Matt. So here is your list. Kicking it off, the first city is Charlotte, North Carolina.
Decent place to live. I'm going to go number 2 on that one.
Number 2, okay.
North Carolina's a nice place. Been there many times.
All right. Next up, you have Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
I don't even know where that is. And I've been to Pennsylvania many times.
Hershey Park. It's like an hour and a half east of State College. It's like
It's a bit out there then. Okay. I feel like I want to go 4, but I have a feeling there's something bad on the list here. So I'm going to go number 3.
Okay, going number 3 for Harrisburg. Next up, you got San Francisco, California.
That's a number 5 candidate right there.
Gotcha. Number 5.
High taxes, super left-leaning politically. That's a 5.
All right. Next up, you got Seattle, Washington.
That's a number 4. That isn't much better. It's a little better. Not a Pennsylvania level of 3. Did I get it right?
All right. And in your number 1 spot, you have Chicago, Illinois.
No, I didn't get it right. Should have went Charlotte 1.
Yep. I thought you were going to go Harrisburg at number 1 after you went Charlotte 2.
I figured there'd be some other smaller town or Republican city when you started with Charlotte and Harrisburg. I figured there would be something else, not just big cities left.
Yeah, Harrisburg was really only kind of like the smaller one that I gave you. Well, everyone, that is it for episode 18 of the Republic Brothers podcast. Leave us a comment if there's anything you want to hear about in the next episode. Make sure to follow the Republic Brothers podcast on social media. Leave us a rating, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.